and get all that stuff out of the way first so that we can get to the fun stuff. Our brains have 3 levels of consciousness. It starts with the conscious mind, and the conscious is everything that you guys are fully aware of. You know you're sitting here in your chairs. You know that you've watched speakers today. You know what you ate for lunch. That's all conscious. Below the surface of your awareness is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious is the stuff that you can pull from if you want to. As a therapist, when people would come into my office, we were dealing with the subconscious. They were talking about their childhoods, their breakups. They were talking about their terrible jobs, sometimes their amazing ones. And when we go into that subconscious mind and we dig a little bit deeper, we find a lot of our behaviors and our patterns. But what we don't find is the root source of how they happened in the first place. That's what the unconscious is all about, and that is the shadow. In 1863, Carl Jung, a famous Swiss psychiatrist, you guys have probably heard of him, came up with the term. At the time, he was working with Sigmund Freud, and the two of them together had very different ideas that operated along the same lines, and Jung noticed that everyone sees the world differently. And then I see things in a way that is very different from each and every single one of you in this room. And things will trigger me that won't bother you, and vice versa. When Jung noticed this, he realized that the root cause of our behaviors, the way that we see the world, everything about who we are, all comes from something deeper. The unconscious mind is essentially a gigantic junk closet in your brain. Every second of every day, you are collecting information, and your brain is trying to figure out what to do with it. And most of the time, it goes into that unconscious junk closet because you don't need it regularly. Sometimes, when the information is heavy, when it's stuff that is going to weigh you down, the brain will also put it in that unconscious. When I had cancer, the months afterwards are a blur to me now. I don't remember them. There's periods of time that are just gone. And shadow work, going into that unconscious space, is the act of pulling that stuff back up to the surface. We're not doing it just to have it sit at the surface. That would be terrible. If you're walking around thinking about all the worst things that have happened to you every single day, your nervous system would be very overwhelmed. And that is why the unconscious exists. When we have our brains constantly putting everything into that unconscious that we don't need, whether it's the license we saw on the way here, or the memory that you have from 2 years old of hearing your parents fighting downstairs, all of that stuff is put away. And when it hides there, it actually changes everything about you. Everything about you as a person is shaped from your unconscious mind. So here's where we get into the weeds with the science stuff. I promise this will be short. Our brains are constantly taking in information, and from even before you're born, when you are in utero, your brain is a blank space. And every moment, every little interaction, even in utero, the sound of car keys hitting a table that makes the baby jump internally, that is creating what's called a neural pathway. Our brains are like a superhighway system of neural pathways. And these pathways kind of line themselves up like superhighways. So imagine that when you are a baby, before you're even born, there is nothing, like vast desert in every direction. And when you start to have any experience, tiny things, it doesn't take a lot. What happens in those moments is the brain starts to create connections. There's about 700 neural pathways created for children every single day. And that doesn't stop until they're around 7 years old. That means everything about who you are, everything about the way that you see the world, was likely shaped before you were in the 2nd grade. And when that happens, and our brains are wired in these specific ways, we see the world differently. And we go off and do whatever it is that we're going to do, and we get triggered. The bad thing about the unconscious is that that junk closet has an expiration date. There's only so much that can be put into that space. Eventually, it will overflow. And that's where we start to see illness. That's where we see things like autoimmune issues, lupus. That's when we start to see ulcerative colitis. That's when we start to see cancer, like I had. All of the research nowadays is showing that stress is the #1 cause of all autoimmune illnesses, mental illnesses, and cancer. Just let that settle in for a moment, right? Because we are all really stressed out. I don't know about you guys, I was up at 2:45 this morning stressing about today. 2:45 in the morning, and I'm calm. I meditate all the time. It should have been easy. We stress, and it's normal. And our society today puts stress on a pedestal. We make stress into something that is desirable. You guys might be sitting here thinking about, okay, she made a conference, she wrote a book, she does all this stuff. I am relaxing a lot, ask my husband. All of these things happen because I know how to rest. Shadow work is how I figured that out. So my first shadow work session was around the middle of 2018. It was with this woman named Allison Kelsey. She was in the UK. I went to her because she was a therapist, like me, a psychotherapist, who started switching things over, started doing shadow work. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I had no clue. It just seemed right. I figured I would give it a try. And when I had that shadow work session, it opened everything up for me. In that moment, I was able to revisit memories that were so clear it could have happened today. It's sensory. Every piece of us is involved when we have the shadow. The way it is sounding, the way it smells, the way it tastes, the way it feels. All of our senses are involved in those moments because that is how memories are shaped within the brain. So when you go into the shadow, like I did with Allison, and for me it was actually a past life. I'm not going to get into that now, you can read my book. But when we do that stuff and we go into those moments, we realize everything about what makes us who we are, and all of a sudden our life makes sense. It's not about bringing that shadow up to the surface just to have it there, because that would be horrible. We're bringing it up to heal, so that it no longer exists within us. So here's how that works. Now, our brains and our bodies and our energy and our emotions are all connected in something called the subconscious feedback loop. That subconscious feedback loop is how trauma is stored in the body and how we repress into the unconscious. So here's how it works. Every moment you have an experience. So sitting here right now, you guys are hearing me talk. You're smelling some of the candles that people have around you or the perfume of the person right next to you. You're feeling the chair underneath you. And you're seeing everything around you, the people who are here, you're looking at me. All of these different sensory pieces form an experience, and that experience is taken into the brain. And the brain has to categorize what to do with that. And so it creates a chemical reaction based on your past experiences. So the last time you felt soothed, or like you were learning something, we're tripping that. And so different chemicals are going to produce based on that. For some of you, you might be stressed out by learning because your schooling made you feel really anxious. And so listening to me lecture, essentially, I used to be a Penn State professor, so this is what we do. When you lecture and have someone who's anxious about it, it creates specific chemicals in the brain. Those chemicals send a message down the body through your spinal cord, and that is to tell the body what to do next. So if you're stressed, now the body is going to start pumping adrenaline and cortisol. You guys all know this is fight or flight. And most Americans are in fight or flight 90% of the time. That's it. When we have that adrenaline and that cortisol pumping, your heart starts to race. You start to feel like your breathing is getting shallow. You might clam up and feel your shoulders come up towards your ears. And you're going to feel that butterfly feeling in your stomach. It's a little different for everyone, but you know what it feels like for you. And when that happens, to complete this loop, your gut is actually going to send a chemical message back up to the brain. Your thoughts, believe it or not, come from your gut. And so the message that comes up from your gut will reinforce what you already believe. So for those of you who are anxious right now as I'm speaking, you're going to have this chemical reaction start that's going to make you more anxious. For those of you who feel relaxed when I speak, it will reinforce that. If you feel anything else, you'll feel that too. All of these things create the subconscious feedback loop. Your experiences, your emotions, the physical reactions, and then the message that comes up as a thought. So let's say that you're a baby, right? Let's say you're like 2 years old. and you have a toddler bed so you can get out. You're big enough to reach up on your tippy toes to open the door to walk out in the hall. So mom and dad put you to sleep. An hour goes by, you're not tired. You tippy toe out of that bed, you walk over to the door and you open it. And when you do, you hear mom and dad fighting downstairs. At 2 years old, you don't understand the context of the fight. You're not thinking about, well, maybe it's financial. You're feeling like it's you. Up until age 7, children are egocentric, which means that everything is about you up until that point. So every moment where something goes wrong, every hard thing that happens to you, to the people around you, you internalize it and it's yours. If you have a lot of life adversity, you might start to become numb in those moments because that unconscious is taking all of it in for you. So this subconscious feedback loop that gets triggered when we have this little child coming out of their bed at 2, maybe they're sitting at the top of the stairs, they feel the banister of the railing, they hear the parents fighting, they don't understand the words, and they know in their body that it's their fault. That carries with us. We carry that as adults. We hold that trauma. And even though it's slight, like that fight wasn't about the kid, probably not. The fight was probably about something like sex or money, like most fights are. But in that moment, that child feels like it's theirs. And now that child becomes an adult, and they are stressed, they are anxious, they have professors who are jumping down their throats when they're in college or graduate school, they have bosses who are yelling. And when that happens, that same subconscious feedback loop kicks into action. Shadow work is the process of going into these specific memories to change them. It sounds harder than it is because our memories are subjective. Every single moment, your memory about things is changing, even things that happened an hour ago. If you were dancing in a soulful class, you were listening to that panel, your memories about it are already warped from what actually happened in that moment, based on your experiences. So when we do shadow work, what we do is we meditate until you're in what's called a theta brainwave state. Theta is the point where you're sleepy, but you're still awake. You could get up and take a phone call. You could change your mind and do something else. We go into theta every single day. If you guys daydreamed at any point today while you were in a session, like, I wonder what it would be like, you were in theta. And theta is where we can access the unconscious. That junk closet that's back there, it can fling wide open when you're in theta. So with shadow work, what we do to change these memories is we meditate until you're at that point. We open up that door to the memories, and then you just let yourself be there. It sounds ambiguous. It sounds like it would actually be hard, but you do it all the time. Every time you're drifting off to sleep and you start thinking about all the things you have to do, you're doing shadow work in a weird way, because in that moment, your brain is like, here's everything. Just gonna throw it all at you. Because that's what your brain is trying to do to stop you from seeing the shadow. If you let it happen, like if anybody's ever meditated before and you feel like you can't, I think Luna actually said this morning, when you get past the noise, all the stuff that's blocking you, you will start having memories. You will start re-experiencing things that have happened to you. Now, I have quite a few women here who've done my shadow work programs, my shadow seekers, who can attest to the fact that your memories are easily accessible. And getting in there and doing that work and really altering that space, that unconscious mind, by changing the memories, will change everything. That subconscious feedback loop that I was talking about before, what we want to do is we want to interrupt it. We want to change any piece of that four-pronged system, whether it is the experience, the sensory pieces of it, the emotional reaction that comes up, those chemicals in the brain, the physical reaction, that's where I like to kind of cut in, or the thoughts themselves. And when we interrupt that subconscious feedback loop, that is when we actually remember things different. And your brain will do something called synaptic pruning. Those neural pathways, that vast mega superhighway in your brain, will break down certain pieces. And synaptogenesis will occur where new ones go into its place. So all you have to do is be willing to go there. I know it's scary. Trust me, I know it's scary. I've been there many times. It becomes addicting. Because once you start getting into that space and you realize how much you can change, you will be shocked at how different your life will be. My mom's sitting here in the front row. She can attest to the fact that I would not speak as a child. I made my little sister, who's 4 years younger than me, order food for me because I was afraid of people. I was the biggest introvert. I would never do something like this. Shadow work changed that. Shadow work changed everything about who I am because our personalities are not set in stone. Our personalities are formed by our experiences. So don't take it from me. Take it from all the women in this room who have done shadow work with me before, my shadow seekers. And know that anything is possible if you let yourself go there and dive into the shadow. So I'm going to open it up for questions if anybody is curious about shadow work.